So any trait you see now that you don't like, just know it'll be worse in 10 years. It will not get better. Yeah. So today, we're going to talk about personality traits and if they change over time. Now, this show was actually inspired by a tweet that I saw, but if you guys want, you don't have to. We are raising money for a divorce documentary, and I'd really like to get the editing started in about a month and a half. So, being that there's a GoFundMe link in the description. We're trying to get to $100,000. It'd be cool if you guys could donate. If not, the show is free, so do enjoy. Okay, so this tweet that I saw was from that guy that's trying to live forever. Let me pull it up. Brian Johnson, I think his name is. And Brian Johnson is this guy basically who he made like $1 billion on, I think, PayPal or some app. Who cares, right? And then he decided that he was gonna, what's funny? I watch his show and I always think that this is something autistic that looks like something I would do. The Brian Johnson guy, if you see his page, this guy, he has this like don't die thing where he's like trying to live forever. And he just autistically like measures every level of health. And I was laughing when I saw it because, I would explain this to normal people, like maybe more well-adjusted, less online. And they would say that's a crazy thing to do, but I thought it was kind of cool. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. He had a post about his high school reunion. And he said, I had my 30-year high school reunion last night. These sorts of events had a way of inviting a unique sobriety of observation. First, the vast majority of everyone that had left the Mormon church. This is very surprising given the deeply religious adherence of our small 30,000 person town during our childhood. If my class is representative of Mormon membership, generally the religion is evaporating, at least in this geography and demographic. I wonder if that holds true for other religions. So I would agree with this sentiment in general. I would say people are less religious. The religious crowd, if you find, they tend to get studies from like very right-leaning institutions. But generally, if you look at the general trends of church attendance, it's mostly down. Second, everyone was basically the same as when we graduated. After 30 years of life, the similarities of behavior were fun to see. This isn't surprising, as evidence shows the stability of personality excluding substantial life-changing events. Third, given the stability of personality over a lifetime, if you're not happy with your behavioral patterns, best to be sober about the challenges of changing oneself because you will inevitably become your patterns. 30 years is 10,950 days, and I left concluding, one needs to live each day as if that day will one day determine where they will be 30 years from now. Fourth, statistically, by our 30th reunion, we'd expect to have lost less than 20 of our classmates, but I think we've lost more, many to suicide. In the next 10 years, age 50 to 60, it's expected we'll lose 20 more and 40 more from age 60 to 70. Only 250 out of the 400 will still be alive when we are 80. Fifth, our childhood experiences deeply affect our life outcomes. Middle school, junior high, and high school can be especially brutal, and some people never recover or overcome. This led many to not attend. For those that did, we found a vibe together last night that allowed for some long-needed healing. It's insane how fast life happens. I'm still struggling to comprehend how 30 years has passed, and many of my classmates are now grandparents, and I'm not too far off either. I loved my childhood. I loved my friends. Of course, I'm exhibiting a bias of favoring the positive. However, in contrast to the world my children grew up in, I'm grateful that we had so much freedom to explore, play, be independent, and not be imprisoned to our devices. I wonder if social media and device addiction is really the next great plague that we can't or refuse to see. Well, I think we all know that social media is messing up our brains, but you can't really I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I think most relationships start either through social media or dating apps. So if you don't do it that way, you're kind of left behind. Yeah, I mean, you might die alone. Not always, but I'm saying that's a huge pond there. And if you don't do it that way, you're kind of cooked to some extent. So this show, what I thought was the most interesting about this topic is what he said about personality traits and how people consistently, even if it had been 30 years, had the same core personality traits. And this really got me in like deep thought for like 2 days. I don't think that this is what social media is rotting our brain. I don't think it should have had me thinking for 2 full days. But I thought so much, I just thought I have to do a show on this topic. Now, my dad, he's the wisest guy I've ever met in my life. I am so delusional that I literally think my father is smarter than Donald Trump. I do. And my dad, I say this to him sometimes, and my dad is just like, what is wrong? But I do. I don't think, I'm like, if I wish I could have a camera following my father for a day, because that is the most productive, most intelligent, and just good-natured man I've ever met. Really. I mean, it's kind of what made me, in a way, less religious. Because my dad, he's not really the most religious guy, and he's the most moral person I've ever met in my life. And the religious people I would meet would be batshit crazy. Not all, but just enough, especially the women, if I'm going to be like for real here. Women are the worst marketing for any religion ever. Ever. If you want people to come to your church, there's this idea. And maybe the boobs will get the men in for a little bit, but then once the women crash out. Anyways, neither here nor there. As most of you know, I have been fighting on the front lines of the simp epidemic for years, but I need to tell you about a quiet weapon being ratcheted up against men that is rarely talked about. It's not just the relentless anti-masculinity propaganda and OnlyFans hoes causing the societal issues that we discuss on this show. Did you know that the average city's tap water contains trace pharmaceuticals and endocrine disruptors? This often includes estrogen from birth control. The average adult consumes a credit card worth of plastic every single week. That's 5 grams of plastic a week on average. So it's no wonder that the average male's testosterone is half of what the average was 50 years ago. Testosterone levels decline 1% a year, and without a course correction, we are headed towards extinction. No matter how based you are, you need to be naturally boosting your testosterone. My friends at Chalk, CHOQ.com, are on a mission to save mankind from extinction by boosting your vitality. Chalk's Male Vitality Stack contains premium and potent herbs clinically studied to naturally boost your testosterone levels, sperm count, and overall vitality. Just one of the many ingredients in the Male Vitality Stack was studied in double-blind human clinical trials to boost total testosterone 20% in 90 days. When you boost your testosterone, you'll have more mental clarity, you're more capable of making decisions and taking risks. Having high testosterone will also affect your pheromones, so women will find you more attractive subconsciously. Get the Chalk Male Vitality Stack right now on chalk.com. That's CHOQ.com. Use my name Pearl as your coupon code and you'll get 25% off site-wide on chalk.com. That's CHOQ.com. My name Pearl is the discount code. So a couple of years ago, this story doesn't make me look the best, but I'm going to tell it anyway. I was dating this guy. My dad just was not the biggest fan. This was like in my early 20s. And, I was talking to my dad about him and I was like, Dad, do people change? Like the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, young little Pearl, right? And he looks at me and he said, yeah, people do change. They get worse over time. I got to stop banging the desk, don't I? And he said they get worse over time. So any trait you see now that you don't like, just know it'll be worse in 10 years. It will not get better. And this really had me thinking. At the time, I did end up breaking up with this guy. I did end up dumping him. But it got me thinking about what I'd seen in terms of people's personality traits. But when you're young, I think there's just a level, and this is why men love the young women. We're just so full of hope back then, we're so naive. We're so like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. But I personally know what it's like to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and have people, and I should say movements take advantage of that in a way. You know, they sell you a future, they sell you hope. When really no one can really say for sure what's going to happen, but if we follow where the trends are going, it's all pretty much not great, if I'm being honest here. Um, Neither here nor there. I gotta stop going down this. So, anyways, at the time I was in my young 20s, and when my dad said this to me, I didn't really have the life experience or the perspective to know if that was true or untrue. But I have to say, whenever somebody has done me wrong in life, whenever there's been somebody, and I keep saying this on the show, whenever there's been somebody that has done something negative towards me, I keep saying my enemies, they have a tendency to take themselves out. There was a woman, I'm not even going to say her name, but she's been crashing out on me for years. And I would say mercilessly has bullied me. And, I choose to be here. So I'm not playing victim. I'm just saying objectively, I think she made videos pinpointing every little detail of what is wrong with my face. It's like I'm just trying to talk, and she has a video nitpicking every little part of my face. I'm like, can a bitch exist? That's how women are. And it turns out, I'm not even going to the rumors about her, but I'll just say they're 10 times worse. And the things I found out about this woman, I'm like, you have to deal with yourself. I don't even have to get revenge. And I think that's really been true for the most part in life, is people that have a super negative trait about them, it tends to not change, and I would say it tends to just get worse over time. Now, I do think people have ideological shifts. So I do think I have seen men and women go from conservative to liberal and liberal to conservative. And I do at times, not Nala, but I do at times think there's genuine change in those shifts. But, for example, I have a close friend who I love him, but he's a libtard. You know what I mean? He is who he is. And, but he used to be very far right. And I would say the people that tend to go one way and go another, it's more of a personality trait where they're just very open-minded, They're very, and while they might believe one thing or another, maybe they're really naive, and they're just that kind of person that is a naive person and that can be easily swayed one way or another. Where, I've always envied, in a way, people that could just have an opinion and not have to talk about it or think about every angle for 3 hours. Because I guess I make money doing this now, but in an average world, when I was younger, I used to not go out to bars. Like, I would be invited to events and I wouldn't go because I wanted to binge YouTube. Like, I think something is off with me. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, that's not normal for a 23-year-old woman to do. Like, and I remember my friends, they would ask me to go to stuff, and I would just be really bored by the idea of like going to this event where I'm going to do what? I'm a bad dancer. Now I have to get all these calories. I'm going to have to work off later. I should just hang out and do YouTube. I've heard the Zoomers are worse than the millennials. I'm almost a Zoomer, but not quite. So, but it still gets me thinking, I think people's core traits are the same, but at times there is a skill deficit. I'll give you another example. I was never the type to really shake it and move on the dance floor. I was always kind of grossed out by, when I was younger, it was really grinding or nothing. And I'm like, why do these have to be my choices? It's like grinding, or like white people jumping. I'm like, what? These are my choices. So I never liked dancing. But then I learned the skill of salsa dancing, and I actually thought it was really fun because, it was more of like a framework, and I'm kind of athletic. So I may act different in that environment, in an environment I normally would just be off to myself. because I had a new skill. And I think that's true sometimes with men and women, where men, I mean, women are kind of scary, and I think men know that from a young age. You know, the woman says you hit her, even though she hit you 5 times first in the playground, and now you're grounded, right? So men learn from a young age. It's like women have all this power. She'll insult you, and then the second you insult her back, your mom's like, "What are you doing, you meanie?" And you're like, "Are you kidding me?" So I think men kind of start, kind of afraid of women. And there are men that's kind of something they have to overcome to approach women in public or like say hi to them, whatever. That's a skill. But if you ask any of the people that know them, who they are at their core, they're either the friendly guy in the group, there's always the leader in the guy group because men naturally can have a hierarchy. Women's leader in the friend group is usually the bitch, where men's leader in the friend group is usually the most competent one or charismatic, I'd say, in general, because men naturally can organize themselves a little better. Where women, it's like, who can get away with the worst behavior? We're going to put her on top. um, but neither here nor there. I think people's core is pretty much the same from the time that you're a young age. And the amount of time it would take, like I'll use me as an example because it's just easier. And I'll use someone else in a second. I've always been a friendly, talkative person. I've always, I could always talk someone's ear off. I've always been the smile. When I was in college, I don't think most people knew I was conservative. But I was always the type, like, I don't think it would surprise people that I'm a YouTuber now. Like, I used to rollerblade on campus with my dog and like a tie-dye shirt. I'd have cat shirts. So I think people might have thought I was a hippie. Do you know what I mean? Because of the way I used to be big into the cat shirts, actually. But if you talk to me, my core, was an outgoing person. And the amount of time it would take me to be introverted, I'd rather just kill myself. Like, it would just... I like the amount that I would have to fight to be something I'm not. And, and I think that's like a lesson you have to go through in life. If you're a polite person, being a bitch is just not going to come to you. You probably can't do it. You can learn skills to maybe that people don't take advantage of you as much. But if you're a bitch, you might as well be a bitch for a good cause. I saw this crazy woman on Twitter. And this was a woman obviously addicted to social media, obviously a tradcon ethot. And to the point where she put like a selfie next to the Parks shooting, right? And that's a disgusting thing to do. I'm a lighthearted person, so I'm saying this probably in the wrong tone. But, when she's doing this, I'm thinking this woman's crazy, but this same crazy woman got like 400 liberals fired. And I'm thinking that's a woman using her crazy for good at least. But the amount of time it would take her to undo the crazy, impossible. I mean, some guy would have to wrestle it out of her. Good luck. She'll do that to you. To be fair, she will do that to you when you guys break up, whoever's dating her. So, I'd be warned, and so that's really what I was really thinking of. And I was wondering if you guys have had the same experience, if you've seen people change or if they generally say the same. I've seen people maybe have slight ideological changes. I've seen at times maybe certain environments change people. And I've heard people say the military changes people. Now, I don't know. I need you guys to call in. I know there's a lot of military people that watch this show. And I've never been in the military, so I cannot speak to that. And I know this comparison I'm about to make is a terrible comparison to the military. This is not the same. This is not the same. But this is the only comparison I have based on what I've seen. Okay. So please don't roast me, but so when I did volleyball, this is not the same. But we did have volleyball, we did have very extreme workouts in volleyball. Now, for women, I will say, but we had 3-minute. I actually picked my school because I'm a very passionate person. And I've realized in life this at times can be my greatest strength and my greatest weakness. But I really wanted a volleyball school that was going to push me. And I actually picked the school I did because they didn't follow NCAA guidelines. I think they got in trouble later. But I wanted to be in the gym more because I was like, this isn't enough. I get like 2 hours a day. This bullshit. Women whine, and then they limit your gym time. They say you can't be in the gym longer. And these coaches, they did not care. They did not. So if you wanted to be, anyways. So hang on, I just spilled. It's all right. So we would have like 50 burpees. I think we had to do in like a certain amount of time. I think it was like 2 minutes or something. You had to do 50 burpees. You had to do the beep test over a certain number. You had to do an 800. And there were women that worked harder than I would say they normally did. But I would still say if you looked at the group of women, you could pick out the 3 women that usually worked the hardest and the 3 women that usually, like, there was this one girl and I knew she was going to be a balloon. I knew she was going to be fat because we would have to do these group workouts and oh my gosh. She would always, like, we would have to do, I think it was 50 burpees in 4 minutes. I would have to look at the book. I don't remember. But there was one way you did the burpees where it was like 100 and it was like a group of 6 or 3 or I don't know. But all I remember is we kept having to restart this challenge because of this young woman who was just very lazy. I think that's actually the worst trait you can have in the wife is a lazy woman. I know hardworking is more of something women select for, but when I look at my brother's girlfriends, I just can't stand lazy like women, to be honest. So